Chosen one, your silence is driving them insane. The secret panic they feel when they can no longer trigger you. If this story touches your heart and reminds you that God is working quietly in your life even when nobody else understands, type Amen. Do not rush past these words, because there is something precious unfolding within this journey that many people never recognize until much later. What you are about to read is not a story about revenge, pride, or proving anyone wrong, but a story about healing, freedom, and the gentle power that God places inside a heart surrendered to Him. Sometimes the greatest breakthrough arrives when a person finally stops fighting battles that Jesus never asked them to fight. Sometimes the miracle begins when silence replaces endless explanations and peace replaces constant struggle. There was once a soul who spent many years trying to be understood by everyone around them. They explained their intentions repeatedly, defended their actions carefully, and carried a heavy burden every day because they wanted peace with every person they encountered. Yet, no matter how gently they spoke, there were always voices that twisted their words, questioned their motives, and searched endlessly for ways to provoke pain within their heart. The more they tried to explain themselves, the more exhausted they became, and the more distant true peace seemed to feel. Type 1212 if you walk by faith. One evening, after another difficult day filled with misunderstanding and disappointment, that weary soul sat quietly beneath a sky painted with fading colors. The wind moved softly through the trees, and the world seemed strangely still around them. In that silence, they felt something they had not felt for a very long time. They felt the gentle presence of God wrapping around their wounded heart like a warm blanket during a cold night. No loud voice echoed from heaven, and no dramatic sign appeared before their eyes. Yet deep within their spirit, they sensed Jesus whispering peace into places that had been hurting for years. If you are grateful for the quiet ways God comforts broken hearts, please take a moment to like the video and USB subscribe to this channel and share this journey with someone who needs encouragement today. For the first time, they realized something important that would change the direction of their entire life. They understood that not every accusation deserved an answer, not every insult required a response, and not every misunderstanding needed endless explanation. They began to see that Jesus himself remained silent during moments when others expected him to defend himself. His strength was never found in arguing with every critic. His strength was found in complete trust in his heavenly Father. As days passed, the soul slowly changed. Instead of reacting to every hurtful comment, they brought their pain before God in prayer. Instead of chasing approval from people who were determined to misunderstand them, they focused on drawing closer to Jesus. Instead of spending sleepless nights replaying painful conversations, they rested in the knowledge that God knew the truth about their heart. Something unexpected began happening during this season of growth. The people who once depended on provoking emotional reactions became confused. They had grown comfortable with predictable responses. They expected anger, frustration, tears, or endless attempts at self-defense. Yet suddenly those reactions disappeared. The silence they encountered was not coldness or bitterness. It was peace. It was healing. It was a soul learning to trust God more than human opinions. Many people never realize how uncomfortable genuine peace can make those who thrive on conflict. When someone can no longer control your emotions, they often feel powerless. When someone can no longer disturb your inner peace, they begin facing something they never expected. They begin facing themselves. The soul noticed this change, but felt no desire to celebrate another person's discomfort. Their heart had changed too much for that. Instead, they felt compassion. They understood that many hurting people try to create pain in others because they carry unresolved pain within themselves. Jesus had taught them that wounded hearts often wound others, and lost souls often create confusion wherever they go. One morning, while walking along a quiet path surrounded by sunlight and birdsong, the soul reflected on the many battles they had survived. Some memories still carried sadness, but those memories no longer controlled them. They remembered every sleepless night, spent wondering why certain people seemed determined to bring discouragement into their life. They remembered every moment they questioned their worth because of another person's harsh words. Yet they also remembered every prayer that God answered with strength, wisdom, and comfort. As they continued walking, they felt gratitude growing inside them. Gratitude for the tears that taught them dependence upon God. Gratitude for the disappointments that revealed God's faithfulness. Gratitude for the painful seasons that led them toward deeper intimacy with Jesus Christ. The truth slowly became clear. Their silence was never about defeating anyone. Their silence was evidence that healing had begun. It was proof that God was restoring broken places within their heart. It was a sign that they no longer needed constant validation from people because they had discovered their identity in God's love. A shocking CIA document just revealed a 7-second brain ritual that some people say is changing their financial lives overnight. What makes this different is that 4 neuroscience labs reportedly tested the method and confirmed its unusual effects on focus, confidence, and money attraction. People drowning in debt claim they are now attracting unexpected income, luxury cars, dream homes, and once impossible opportunities. The strange part? This information keeps disappearing online. If this video found you, do not ignore it. Click the link in the description and comments now before access is removed. This transformation did not happen overnight. Some days remained difficult. Some wounds still ached. Certain words still carried the ability to sting. Yet every time they felt tempted to return to old patterns, they remembered the peace that Jesus had placed within them. They remembered that God's approval mattered more than public opinion. They remembered that protecting their relationship with Christ was far more important than winning temporary arguments. Meanwhile, those who once expected emotional reactions found themselves facing an unfamiliar reality. The old methods no longer worked. The buttons they once pushed no longer produced the same results. The chaos they once created no longer found a home within that healed heart. The silence standing before them was not weakness. It was strength refined through prayer, patience, and trust in God. The soul eventually realized that silence can speak more powerfully than many words. It can reveal maturity where arguments once lived. It can reveal faith where fear once ruled. It can reveal healing where pain once dominated every thought. Most importantly, it can reveal the work of Jesus Christ, transforming an ordinary life from the inside outward. As seasons continued changing, the soul became known for something entirely different than before. They were no longer recognized for defending themselves or explaining every detail of their life. Instead, they became known for their calm spirit, gentle kindness, and quiet confidence in God's guidance. People began noticing a light within them that had not existed before. It was not the light of personal achievement. It was the reflection of God's presence. The most beautiful part of their journey was not that difficult people became frustrated. The most beautiful part was that Jesus became more visible within their life. Every moment of restraint, every prayer offered instead of an argument, and every act of forgiveness reflected his character more clearly. Type yes to affirm. As the evening sun settled across the horizon and painted the sky with golden light, the soul looked upward and smiled softly. They understood now that some victories arrive without applause, recognition, or celebration. Some victories happen quietly inside the heart where only God can see them. Those hidden victories often become the most important ones of all. The journey was far from over, yet they no longer feared the road ahead. Jesus walked beside them through every valley and every mountaintop. God continued shaping their character through every season. The silence that once seemed empty had become filled with peace, wisdom, and faith. Their thoughts slowly shifted away from fear and toward gratitude, because God had been teaching them a lesson far greater than simply remaining silent. He had been teaching them how to remain anchored when everything around them tried to pull them away from His peace. There were moments when old memories returned unexpectedly, bringing reminders of painful conversations and difficult seasons. The soul would remember how desperately they once fought to make others understand their intentions. They would remember the endless explanations, the emotional exhaustion, and the disappointment that followed when understanding never arrived. Yet now those memories felt different, almost like looking at distant storms from the safety of a warm home. The storms were real, and the pain had once been overwhelming, but Jesus had carried them through every dark moment. One quiet afternoon, while sitting beside a small river that moved gently over smooth stones, the soul reflected on how much had changed within them. The water continued flowing without resistance, never arguing with the rocks standing in its path. Instead, it simply moved forward, finding its way around every obstacle. As they watched the river, they felt God placing a beautiful truth within their heart. Not every obstacle must be removed before progress can continue. Sometimes grace simply flows around what cannot be changed. Type 1919 to receive miracles. That realization settled deeply within their spirit. For years they had spent enormous amounts of energy trying to change people who had no desire to change. They had carried responsibility that never belonged to them. They had mistaken other people's choices for personal failures. Yet Jesus was gently showing them that every person stands responsible for their own heart before God. The soul could offer kindness, patience, and forgiveness, but they could not force understanding where understanding was rejected. As this truth grew stronger within them, another beautiful change began taking place. They stopped measuring their worth according to other people's reactions. Compliments no longer controlled their emotions, and criticism no longer destroyed their peace. Their identity became rooted in something much deeper and far more stable. It became rooted in the love of God. This freedom transformed many areas of their life. Relationships became healthier because they no longer depended on constant approval. Conversations became more peaceful because they no longer felt compelled to defend every misunderstanding. Their prayers became richer because they spent less time focusing on earthly conflicts and more time focusing on God's presence. The people who once expected emotional reactions continued watching from a distance. Some felt confused by the change, others felt frustrated because the familiar patterns no longer existed. There had once been a predictable cycle of provocation and response. Now the cycle had been broken. The soul no longer provided the reaction that many expected to receive. Yet what those observers could not see was the hidden work God had been accomplishing behind the scenes. They saw silence, but God saw healing. They saw restraint, but God saw spiritual growth. They saw distance from conflict, but God saw a child learning to trust Him more completely. What if the reason money keeps avoiding you has nothing to do with hard work? A leaked CIA-backed study claims there is a hidden 7-second ritual that can retrain the brain to attract wealth and abundance naturally. Verified by multiple neuroscience labs, this simple method is helping ordinary people escape financial stress and experience sudden breakthroughs in income, success, and lifestyle. Some users say their lives changed within days, but there is a reason this information is not being talked about openly. The page sharing this secret could vanish at any moment. Click the link in the description and comments before it is too late. Many believers spend years asking God to remove difficult people from their lives, yet sometimes God chooses a different path. Sometimes He uses those challenges to build strength, wisdom, patience, and deeper faith. The soul began understanding that some of their greatest spiritual growth had occurred during seasons they once wished would end immediately. Those painful experiences had taught them how to lean upon Jesus when human strength was no longer enough. One evening, after finishing a long day, they sat quietly near a window while gentle rain tapped softly against the glass. The world outside seemed wrapped in peace. Streetlights reflected through tiny drops of water, creating beautiful patterns across the darkness. As they watched the rain, they thought about how God often works in hidden ways. Rain falls quietly, yet it nourishes entire fields. Roots grow unseen beneath the earth, yet they support mighty trees. Healing often happens deep within the heart before visible changes appear on the surface. In the same way, God's work inside their life had been taking place long before anyone else noticed the transformation. The soul smiled softly as they considered how patient Jesus had been throughout their journey. He never rushed them when they struggled. He never abandoned them when they doubted. He never grew tired of comforting them during difficult seasons. Every step of healing had been guided by His gentle hands. As months continued passing, something remarkable happened. Opportunities for conflict still appeared from time to time, but the soul responded differently than before. They no longer felt compelled to prove themselves. They no longer felt responsible for correcting every false assumption. Their peace remained intact because it was no longer built upon human acceptance. This did not mean they became cold or indifferent. Their heart remained compassionate and loving. They continued praying for those who misunderstood them. They continued offering kindness whenever possible. They simply learned that love does not require constant self-defense, and compassion does not require endless emotional exhaustion. Jesus had shown them a better way. The soul also discovered that silence creates space for God to work in situations where human effort often fails. When they stopped trying to control every outcome, they witnessed God opening doors they could never have opened themselves. Misunderstandings resolved naturally. Truth revealed itself over time. Relationships that were meant to remain grew stronger, while unhealthy connections gradually faded away. There was great comfort in realizing they did not have to manage every detail of life. God was already present in every situation. His wisdom exceeded their understanding. His timing surpassed their plans. His purposes remained faithful even when circumstances seemed confusing. One morning, while walking through a field illuminated by the first light of dawn, the soul felt overwhelmed by gratitude. The sky glowed with soft colors stretching across the horizon, and birds filled the air with joyful songs. Everything around them seemed to celebrate the goodness of God. In that moment, they realized something extraordinary. The peace they now carried was not fragile. It was not dependent upon perfect circumstances or cooperative people. It was rooted in Jesus Christ, and because it came from Him, it could survive storms that once would have shattered them. The soul remembered countless nights when they believed happiness would only come after certain people changed. Now they understood that true peace arrives when God changes the heart. Circumstances may improve, and relationships may heal, but the deepest transformation always begins within. Type 1111 if you trust in God. As they continued walking through the morning light, they prayed quietly for everyone still trapped in cycles of conflict and emotional struggle. They prayed for hearts burdened by anger, fear, bitterness, and disappointment. They prayed for people desperately seeking peace in places where peace could never be found. Most of all, they prayed that others would discover the same freedom Jesus had given them. The journey had taught them that silence guided by God's wisdom carries tremendous power. It is not the silence of defeat. It is not the silence of fear. It is the silence of a heart secure in God's love, confident in His justice, and resting in His promises. The world often celebrates loud victories and public triumphs, yet many of heaven's greatest victories happen quietly. They happen when a wounded heart chooses forgiveness instead of resentment. They happen when a weary soul chooses faith instead of despair. They happen when a believer chooses peace instead of endless conflict. As the sun climbed higher into the sky, the soul felt a deep sense of assurance. Jesus had not brought them this far, only to abandon them now. Every difficult season had served a purpose. Every painful lesson had contributed to their growth. Every moment of silence had prepared them for a deeper relationship with God. Situations that once felt overwhelming now seemed much smaller when viewed through the lens of God's eternal love. Problems that once consumed entire days no longer possessed the same power. The soul was learning that peace is not simply the absence of conflict. Peace is the presence of Christ within the heart, remaining steady even when difficulties continue surrounding every side. There were still moments when unexpected words reached their ears. News traveled through friends, family members, and distant acquaintances. They occasionally heard that certain people continued discussing them, criticizing them, or trying to understand why they had changed so dramatically. Long ago, hearing such things would have stolen their joy for days. They would have replayed every detail repeatedly, searching for explanations and worrying about opinions they could never control. Now something different happened. A former government researcher exposed a powerful 7-second money ritual that is now spreading rapidly online. According to leaked CIA files, this brainwave technique may help unlock a hidden part of the mind connected to wealth, opportunity, and financial success. 4 neuroscience labs reportedly confirmed the results. Since then, people struggling with debt claim they have started attracting money, better careers, expensive homes, luxury travel, and financial freedom. This secret is gaining attention fast and may not stay public for long. Click the description and comments now to see the full method before it disappears. Instead of anxiety, they felt sadness mixed with compassion. They understood that people who spend their energy creating turmoil often carry hidden struggles that nobody else sees. Jesus had opened their eyes to a truth that changed everything. Behind many harsh words exists a wounded heart. Behind many attempts to provoke others exists an unhealed spirit, searching desperately for peace. The soul remembered how lost they once felt before fully surrendering their burdens to God. They remembered the insecurity that sometimes controlled their thoughts. They remembered moments when fear disguised itself as strength and worry disguised itself as responsibility. Those memories helped them avoid becoming proud about their growth. Every step forward had been possible only because Jesus patiently guided them. One beautiful afternoon, while helping an elderly neighbor tend a small garden filled with colorful flowers, the soul noticed how carefully each plant was cared for. Some flowers stood tall and vibrant. Others were still growing quietly beneath the soil, where nobody could see them. The neighbor smiled and explained that growth often continues long before visible signs appear. Those simple words remained in the soul's heart throughout the day. God was showing them another lesson. Many people wanted immediate results. They wanted instant healing, immediate understanding, and quick solutions to every struggle. Yet God's work often resembled the hidden growth of seeds beneath the earth. His greatest miracles frequently developed in secret before eventually revealing themselves at exactly the right time. The soul realized their own transformation had followed that pattern. Nobody noticed the prayers whispered during lonely nights. Nobody saw the tears shed in God's presence. Nobody witnessed the countless moments when they chose forgiveness instead of resentment, yet those hidden moments had become the foundation of everything beautiful now growing within their life. Type 2323 if you agree. As seasons changed, the soul became increasingly aware of God's faithfulness. Looking backward, they could see divine protection in places where they once saw only disappointment. Certain closed doors had prevented future heartache. Certain delays had provided necessary preparation. Certain painful endings had made room for healthier beginnings. This realization filled them with gratitude. It is easy to trust God when everything unfolds according to personal plans. Trust becomes far more meaningful when life feels confusing and uncertain. The soul had learned that Jesus remained trustworthy even during seasons when answers seemed distant. His goodness did not depend upon circumstances. His love remained constant regardless of temporary challenges. One evening, while sitting beneath a sky filled with countless stars, the soul reflected on how vast God's creation truly is. The same God who placed every star in its position also knew every detail of their life. The same Savior who calmed storms could calm troubled hearts. The same loving Father who cared for generations before them continued watching over every step they took. That thought brought tremendous comfort. For so many years they had carried responsibilities that belonged to God. They worried about changing people's opinions. They worried about fixing every misunderstanding. They worried about protecting their reputation from every criticism. Yet none of those burdens had ever been theirs to carry. Jesus had invited them into something much better. He invited them into trust. Trust allowed them to release outcomes they could not control. Trust allowed them to surrender relationships into God's hands. Trust allowed them to stop striving endlessly for acceptance and instead rest securely in divine love. The people who once depended on emotional reactions still struggled to understand what had happened. The familiar person they once knew seemed different now. The old vulnerabilities had been replaced with quiet confidence. The old desperation for approval had been replaced with inner stability. The old habit of explaining everything had been replaced with peaceful wisdom. What they failed to recognize was that true transformation always confuses those who expect people to remain unchanged. When God begins healing a life, old patterns lose their influence. New priorities emerge. New perspectives develop. New strength appears where weakness once existed. Yet Jesus always met them within those moments. His presence became more precious than ever before. The soul discovered that intimacy with God often grows strongest during seasons when human approval becomes less important. The quieter life became, the more clearly they sensed God's guidance. The fewer distractions surrounding them, the more easily they recognized His voice leading them forward. One morning, while watching sunlight break through dark clouds after a long storm, they felt another powerful lesson settle into their heart. Storms never last forever. No matter how intense the darkness becomes, light eventually returns. No matter how difficult a season feels, God's faithfulness remains constant. That lesson applied to much more than weather. The emotional storms they once endured had eventually passed. The painful seasons that seemed endless had finally ended. The wounds that once felt impossible to heal had gradually become testimonies of God's restoring power. This realization gave them hope for every future challenge. If Jesus had carried them through previous valleys, He would carry them through future ones as well. If God had remained faithful before, He would remain faithful again. The character of God never changes. Have you noticed how some people seem to attract wealth effortlessly? A leaked CIA document may finally explain why. Scientists studying brainwaves uncovered a simple 7-second ritual believed to activate a powerful abundance response inside the mind. Backed by 4 neuroscience labs, this at-home technique is helping people move from financial struggle to dream lifestyles filled with money, success, travel, and peace of mind. The most unbelievable part is how easy it is to do. But this information could be removed without warning. Click the link in the description and comments now before it is gone forever. As their faith matured, the soul stopped viewing silence as merely a response to difficult people. They began viewing silence as sacred space where God could work freely. Silence created room for prayer. Silence created room for reflection. Silence created room for healing. Within that quiet place, Jesus continued shaping their character day after day. The soul also learned that forgiveness and silence often work together beautifully. Forgiveness releases bitterness. Silence prevents unnecessary conflict. Together, they create freedom that many people spend years searching for. This freedom did not mean forgetting painful experiences. It meant refusing to allow those experiences to control the future. It meant trusting God to handle justice while focusing personal energy on growth, faith, and love. One afternoon, while helping a young child learn how to ride a bicycle, the soul witnessed a beautiful illustration of God's patience. The child fell several times, becoming discouraged after each mistake. Yet gentle encouragement helped them stand again and continue trying. Eventually the child succeeded, riding confidently with a joyful smile. Watching that moment brought tears to the soul's eyes. God had treated them the same way. Throughout every failure, every setback, and every moment of weakness, Jesus never abandoned them. He patiently encouraged them to keep moving forward. He lifted them after every fall. He reminded them that growth requires perseverance. Type Amen if you believe. As evening arrived and golden light stretched across the landscape, the soul felt overwhelming gratitude for the journey God had led them through. The road had not always been easy. There had been heartbreak, disappointment, confusion, and pain. Yet every step had carried purpose. What others viewed as silence had become something far more meaningful. It had become evidence of healing. It had become proof of spiritual maturity. It had become a reflection of God's work within a willing heart. The soul understood now that the greatest victory was never making others panic because they could no longer trigger emotional reactions. The greatest victory was allowing Jesus Christ to transform pain into peace, wounds into wisdom, and brokenness into strength. As the months continued unfolding beneath God's faithful care, the soul began noticing something they had never fully understood before. Peace was not merely changing their reactions. Peace was changing the atmosphere around their entire life. Places that once felt heavy now felt lighter. Days that once seemed filled with tension now carried a quiet sense of purpose. Even ordinary moments seemed touched by a deeper awareness of God's presence. There was a time when every conversation felt like a test. Every disagreement felt like a threat. Every misunderstanding felt like a personal wound that demanded immediate attention. Yet Jesus had slowly removed those chains from their heart. He had shown them that true freedom comes when a person stops allowing other people's behavior to determine their inner condition. One cool morning, the soul sat alone on a wooden bench overlooking a peaceful valley. The grass moved gently beneath the wind, and sunlight rested softly upon distant hills. Everything seemed calm and unhurried. As they sat there, they reflected on the years they had spent trying to earn peace through effort. The soul smiled quietly as this realization settled deeper into their spirit. The more they surrendered, the more peace they experienced. The more they trusted Jesus, the less power fear seemed to possess. The more they focused on God's voice, the quieter every other voice became. This transformation created an unexpected ripple effect. People who genuinely loved them noticed the difference almost immediately. Family members observed a new calmness within their conversations. Friends recognized a new confidence within their decisions. Even strangers occasionally commented on the kindness and patience that seemed to flow naturally from their heart. The soul never took credit for these changes. They knew exactly where the transformation had begun. Every bit of growth belonged to Jesus. Every moment of healing came from His grace. Every step forward reflected His guidance. Type 2020 to claim miracles. One afternoon, while volunteering to help distribute food to families facing difficult circumstances, the soul met an elderly woman whose eyes carried both sorrow and hope. He created hearts capable of resting in His care. He created souls capable of trusting His wisdom. He created believers capable of walking through uncertainty without being consumed by fear. The soul understood this truth more clearly than ever before. Silence had become one of God's tools for teaching them these lessons. Through silence, they learned patience. Through silence, they learned trust. Through silence, they learned that not every battle deserves attention. As the seasons continued changing, another beautiful realization emerged. The people who once sought reactions were no longer the focus of the story. For a long time, the soul believed their journey centered around those difficult relationships. They thought healing meant learning how to handle certain individuals more effectively. They thought peace meant finding better responses to challenging situations. Now, they understood something much greater. The story had always been about Jesus. It was never truly about difficult people. It was about a Savior patiently transforming a heart. It was about God teaching His child how to live above circumstances rather than beneath them. It was about discovering an identity rooted in divine love rather than human approval. This understanding changed everything. Instead of looking outward at those who once created turmoil, the soul began looking upward toward Christ. Every lesson pointed back to Him. Every victory reflected His work. Every moment of healing revealed His faithfulness. This may sound unbelievable, but thousands of people are talking about a secret 7-second ritual connected to leaked CIA research. The method is designed to shift your brain into a frequency linked to wealth, abundance, and opportunity. People who once lived paycheck to paycheck claim they are now seeing dramatic financial changes, from unexpected money to luxury purchases and dream vacations. 4 neuroscience labs reportedly tested the technique and confirmed its powerful mental effects. You were guided to this for a reason, but this page may not stay online much longer. Click the link in the description and comments now before the secret disappears. One evening, while watching children laugh and play in a nearby park, the soul noticed something beautiful about their joy. Children rarely spend time worrying about tomorrow's opinions or yesterday's criticisms. Without those difficult relationships, they might never have developed the spiritual maturity now growing within them. Type 666 if you trust Jesus.